Hello and welcome to the January 2026 edition of the Soul Briefing. I'm Marek von Rennenkamp. In a January 7th appearance on the Megyn Kelly Show, UAP whistleblower David Grush addressed former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper's appearance in the documentary The Age of Disclosure, a truly remarkable and groundbreaking film featuring nearly 36 high-level government and congressional officials speaking candidly about the UAP topic. Now, according to Grush, Clapper, quote, managed the UAP crash retrieval issue, end quote, and, quote, placed people in critical roles to manage this issue, end quote. Now, that's quite the allegation. In The Age of Disclosure, Clapper, of course, does not go nearly that far in his comments. Instead, he states that the Air Force ran a previously unacknowledged, quote, active program, end quote, to track UAP activity, and that much of such activity occurred around testing ranges in the western United States to include, and I'm quoting Clapper directly here, quote, Area 51, end quote. Setting aside Grush's allegations, Clapper's comments in and of themselves are enormously significant. First off, the U.S. government claims that it stopped tracking UAP activity in 1969 when it ended its long-running UAP debunking effort, Project Blue Book. Clapper's comments that the Air Force had a, quote, active program to track UAP apparently in the 1990s directly contradicts years of official government statements, most recently in a congressionally mandated historical review of government involvement with UAP, which was released in early 2024, and which claims that there was a, quote, 40-year gap in UAP investigation programs, end quote, following the termination of Project Blue Book in 1969. Second, Clapper states that the Air Force tracked UAP activity over sensitive testing ranges and specifically mentions Area 51, which has long been rumored to house recovered UAP craft. Clapper's mention of Area 51 is also notable in the context of a well-known UAP video, which was recorded in 1994 in a sensitive testing range adjacent to Area 51. In the footage, an unknown object, which lacks wings and apparent means of propulsion, is observed coming from the direction of Area 51 before making an abrupt change in direction to overfly the camera position, all while rotating in mid-flight. 30 years after the footage was leaked, no suitable explanation has emerged. Ultimately, Clapper's comments by themselves are truly extraordinary, and Grush's allegation that Clapper was far more intimately involved in government UAP efforts demands close scrutiny.
There is a widespread belief that President Trump has been fully briefed on the UFO programs and could disclose it at any moment, and this belief comes from a few places. So let's quickly cover that before we move forward. In November of 2025, whistleblower David Grush appeared on Fox News with Brett Baer and made some very bold statements. He said the current president is very knowledgeable on this subject. Grush also said he believes there's an appetite within the new administration to do the right thing, and there are things happening behind the scenes that he will let the administration discuss when they're ready about UFOs. Then you have Lou Elizondo, who sent a memo directly to President Trump last year titled Prioritizing Emerging Alt-Domain Technologies. The memo urged Trump to appoint a UAP czar within the National Security Council. It called for a 25-year mandatory declassification of all UFO information, and it warned that AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, remains hopelessly stuck in bureaucracy. We know Trump received that memo. Elizondo confirmed it. So the assumption is that Trump and his administration have the information and could act on it. Listen to what was mentioned on the latest Soul Foundation episode.
On December 2nd, shortly after the release of The Age of Disclosure, Secretary of State Marco Rubio told Fox News' Sean Hannity that, quote, generals and, quote, admirals had told the Senate Intelligence Committee and apparently Rubio personally of the existence of secret, unreported UAP retrieval and reverse engineering programs that, astoundingly, presidents are not informed of. Rubio's comments from the Soul Briefing's perspective are yet another truly extraordinary development. Not only is the prospect of flag and general officers, the senior most leaders in the U.S. military, often with decades of experience and service to their names, alleging the existence of secret UAP efforts to senior members of Congress, truly remarkable. It directly contradicts the Pentagon's public line that allegations of secret UAP retrieval and reverse engineering efforts, quote, largely stem from a consistent group of individuals, end quote, who have spoken out publicly for several years. When I pressed a Pentagon spokesperson on the apparent contradiction between Rubio's statement and the government's public line, she did not respond. Rubio's comments regarding, quote, generals and, quote, admirals echo his previous statements describing witnesses who had alleged the existence of secret UAP programs to the Senate Intelligence Committee as, quote, really smart, educated people with high clearances and very important positions in our government, end quote. A well-placed congressional source provided me with additional context, telling me that most of the whistleblowers who spoke to the Senate, quote, are completely unknown to the public, end quote. According to the source, quote, individuals known publicly had been advocating for years and would not have been enough to move the needle, end quote. Once public, the individual told me there are, quote, lots of questions about motivations, end quote. When I asked my source how confident they are in the existence of a legacy UAP program, they responded, quote, hovering around 100%, end quote. In a November 21st interview with Fox News' Brett Baer, UAP whistleblower David Grush stated that President Trump is, quote, very knowledgeable and, quote, very well informed, end quote, on the UAP topic. Grush also stated that he was, quote, partially cleared into and, quote, read the intelligence reports, end quote, from alleged UAP retrieval and reverse engineering programs. Now, as many viewers will recall, Grush filed a formal whistleblower complaint with the Inspector General of the intelligence community in 2022, alleging that elements of the executive branch have illegally and potentially unconstitutionally withheld UAP-related information from Congress. In June 2023, Rubio, then the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, confirmed that the Intelligence Community Inspector General found Grush's allegations, quote, credible and urgent, which triggered mandatory notifications to Congress.
But here's where it gets kind of complicated. The Soul Foundation's episode highlighted something that cuts against this assumption. These programs are so compartmentalized that presidents are not often informed of them. Think about what that means. The commander-in-chief of the United States military, the person constitutionally responsible for the executive branch, is allegedly being kept outside of the loop. And this has been a pattern for decades. Presidents come and go every 4 to 8 years. Career officials in the intelligence community and defense contractors remain in place for decades. And the knowledge stays with them, not with the elected leaders. So when Grush says Trump is very knowledgeable, what does that actually mean? Does Trump know what the career officials know? Does he have access to the actual programs? Or has he simply been given a surface level briefing that tells him something exists without revealing the details? This is a very legit question that we all need to be asking. So let me ask you something. If generals and admirals are confirming to Congress that these programs exist, but presidents are not being informed, who's actually in control? And I mean, who's really pulling the strings here? If you think it's Dick Cheney or James Clapper, think again. Those people had to be appointed to their positions to look over those legacy programs if true. But who is the one saying, okay, you do this and you do that? This is the question at the heart of all of this. You have elected officials who serve 4 to 8 years. You have career intelligence officials and defense contractors who serve for decades. The knowledge stays with them. The programs stay with them.
Therefore, I say strap in, because in this project, I will produce names of alleged legacy program gatekeepers and personnel that I actually encourage the administration to subpoena or serve interrogatories to that I guarantee you have never heard before. After all, our study of AFOSI PJ will lead us to the gatekeeper of UFO SAPs and USAPs that I consider a truly evil boogeyman, a name that I believe I might be taking on a great personal risk by discussing. This being one Mr. Terry Phillips, Senior Executive Service, former PJ Executive Director and Air Force Special Access Program Security Director, and current Vice President for Security at Northrop Grumman. And we will also investigate Phillips' successor in both PJ and Air Force SAPs, Special Agent Lee M. Russ. We will also identify Senior Executive Service Tier 2 personnel Russell E. Weiler, former Director of SAF AAH, or Sensitive Activities, and William E. McClure, former Director, Security, Special Program Oversight and Information Protection, or SAF AAZ, and actually argue why I believe one of these two men was listed as the Air Force SES-2 gatekeeper by Christopher Mellon in a redacted signal exchange. As I wrap up this executive summary, I cannot stress enough the importance of the Rapid Capabilities Office under acquisition, again RCO. So we will also identify Director and Program Executive Officer for the Department of the Air Force RCO, Mr. Randall G. Walden. Numerous, and I mean numerous more names will be listed throughout this project, such as Lawrence J. Delaney, Sue C. Payton, Don Dunlop, and many more. But I cannot stress enough the importance of this select group of individuals that I would consider hostile witnesses as gatekeepers and extremely senior legacy program personnel. And I'll list them again just so nothing gets lost in translation. Terry Phillips, Lee Russ, William McClure, Russell Weiler, and Randall Walden. There is so much more in today's project. With that being said, this project began as a top-down overview of the Air Force's organizational chart that encompasses the entire Air Force organization called the DAF, or the Department of the Air Force, to accurately identify major Air Force compartments engaged with UFO retrievals and RDT&E. And similar to what I said in our intro, I do not believe legacy programs exist throughout the Air Force at large, but instead are tucked away into relevant directorates, offices, major commands, etc., that possess personnel with a need to know to access and facilitate the programs, as well as the relevant infrastructure to operate within the programs. This project actually bypasses the tip of the spear of the Air Force, the civilian-led Secretary of the Air Force, and directly labels elements of the HAF, or the headquarters of the Air Force, the top-level Air Force military staff, that supports directly the Secretary of the Air Force and Air Force Chief of Staff as housing UFO legacy program operations. And that will lead us to our first major revelation that we will explore today. I would like to directly state the vast majority of Air Force UFO legacy program operations reside within the Air Force Secretariat, specifically Air Force Acquisition, or SAF-AQ. Throughout this project, I will label several directorates under SAF-AQ and its Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics as serving imperative roles in the Air Force's efforts to retrieve, down, and exploit non-human technical vehicles. These being SAF-AQL, or Air Force Special Programs, SAF-AQX, or Acquisition Integration, and SAF-AQR, or Science, Technology, and Engineering. Indeed, I believe the controlling entity with oversight of Air Force acquisition legacy programs is an office praised for its accelerated methods for developing, acquiring, and fielding critical combat capabilities. An office with the ability to operate within the gray area of standard acquisition without bureaucratic oversight or hurdles, with access to near limitless funding. The Air Force Acquisition Rapid Capabilities Office, or RCO. Outside of SAF-AQ and RCO, I will outline several offices under the Administrative Assistant to the Secretary of the Air Force. These will include SAF-AAH, Sensitive Activities, and SAF-AAZ, Security/Special Programs Oversight/Info Protection. Ultimately, I will propose a theory that actual RDT&E of exotic vehicles and derivative technologies are conducted out of Air Staff compliance under Air Force Test and Evaluation, or AFTE, and explore test and evaluation subordinate three-letter organizations, and these include AFTEP, or Policy and Programs, AFTER, or Resource Integration, and AFTEZ, the Special Programs Division. And I will investigate how day-to-day operations of legacy programs housed within the headquarters of the Air Force are actually supported by the next layer of the Air Force structural pyramid, and these are MAJCOMs, or Major Commands. Out of the 9 active MAJCOMs, we will solo out Air Combat Command, ACC, Air Force Special Operations Command, or AFSOC, Air Mobility Command, or AMC, and most critically, Air Force Materiel Command, or AFMC. This will lead us to analyze the history of AFMC and its precursor entities that connects shockingly to prior crash retrieval events I have covered in the past, and analyze AFMC's component units, including Air Force Research Lab, AFRL, and the Air Force Test Center, AFTC, formerly the Air Force Flight Test Center, AFFTC. And ultimately, we will arrive at a thesis that multiple Air Force Major Range and Test Facility Bases, or MRTFBs, including the UTTR, Utah Test and Training Range, NTTR, Nevada Test and Training Range, and most critically, the Edwards 412th Test Wing, operate under the Air Force Test Center along with the above-listed entities to perform RDT&E, or again, Research Development Test and Evaluation, of both non-human vehicles that humans have found a way to interface with, and derivative technologies, or alien reproduction vehicles. And of course, guys, you know me. We will analyze the programs from a program protection lens and produce the AFOSI-PJ, or Air Force Office of Special Investigations Special Projects, along with their cadre of FBI agents, as the insider and outsider threat protection element to programs focused on non-human technical vehicles. Of course, in the NRO project, I took a risk introducing 13 possible gatekeepers and high-level legacy personnel,